no.
Hello everyone, I think that's us live. We should have good Wi-Fi. As you can see, it's Thursday morning, 11 o'clock. We're in Chris's garden.
Change is as good as the rest, right?
I wonder if you can see, it looks also like I'm part of the garden. I was just saying that I think I wore this the other day in my garden and I had 2 bees that wouldn't leave me alone. I don't know whether I... Anyway, I've done it again, so we'll see. Maybe if you see me starting to flap around, Gerald.
Or me.
Yeah, there you go. What's this mean? So, welcome everyone. Chris and I are here in his garden in Croydon, and today we're talking about cancer, anxiety and depression. I'm guessing that within that we'll probably talk generally about mental health as well, do you think?
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the overall idea of mental health, whether
Yes.
it's specifically depression and anxiety.
Well, there's quite a whole package, isn't there?
Yeah.
Around that. It's quite a broad subject, let's say.
I know, which I'm sure will start to open up and I don't know, will we understand it more by the end of the hour?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe.
We'll have clearer views anyway, let's say that.
Clearer ideas about what is going on maybe in the cancer world, but also how we feel about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And hopefully that will help the audience as well.
Yeah, I hope so. So, like, we had our last live chat 2 months ago, and
Good grief.
I know, that's crazy. And what you might know from Facebook Live is that we are live, obviously, so it's not recorded. We've chatted about this a lot, but we don't really know what we're going to say completely. We might lose Wi-Fi. If it does, then we'll just reconnect again and the video will come up again. We are obviously just talking uncensored, and I hope that it's sensitive but useful whilst being engaging.
Absolutely.
I guess there's something I wanted to say about watching this as well, because obviously the topic of cancer itself and mental health can be quite tricky, and if you find yourself in a bit of a difficult situation while you're watching this, I don't know, thinking about coping and how you're feeling, I want you to keep yourself safe, and for me that means that you maybe call the right person if you're not feeling great at the moment mentally. It might be that you go off and have a little read about what might be happening if you sort of become aware that actually you're not feeling all right. Essentially, what we want you to do is use this hour as information and support and add your thoughts, but also keep yourself safe and ask for help when you need it. We won't be able to reply to sort of emergency messages on this chat, but we certainly will and would love to have your questions.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
That's what it's about. The idea of these chats is to engage with others out there that are thinking maybe they're on their own, because often I thought that I'm on my own with these issues. So social media is such a brilliant thing now, isn't it? That can bring us all together, and particularly this, you know, where people can actually see us and engage immediately with us. It's great.
Yeah.
So off you go, Emily.
Like some sort of, right, here we go, the presentation. The presentation. I mean, actually, should I say a bit about why we chose this topic? Because we had our chat last time and we thought, let's do it again, and let's see what would be good to talk about. So we put out a little poll, and I think I put anxiety and depression or mental health, I can't remember which, but essentially it came out as like 85% the most wanted topic.
It did, and I didn't even vote for it. I voted for work. I thought that work is going to be absolutely the most
That's because you've just done a blog
subject.
on it.
Yes. No, but that's not true. Everybody talks to me about work, but suddenly there's been a shift, actually, and the mental health anxiety thing is number one now, almost wherever I go.
Okay, so interesting. Everybody talks to you about work, yet maybe we want to talk about mental health. What's that about?
If I'm honest, I think the two are very closely linked. I think the problems that people have with work after cancer certainly are linked to their mental health, because work is, you know, for most of us, has been a big part of our life, and actually work gives us some sort of definition of who we are in society, right? Who we are in our family, what we do, our role.
Yeah.
And when things like that are taken away, big parts of our life have gone. So, personally speaking, I think that work is a contributor of mental health issues after cancer.
I Do you think it's an easier sort of topic to mention? And by the way, I hope that people can hear us. I'm assuming we are, because we've not got too much interference. Do you think that it's sort of like a conduit? So I might say to you, can I ask you about work and how you got back into work, or how you found leaving work, or whatever? But maybe behind it I'm going, but did you cope all right? What was your anxiety, or what was your worries about it like? But I don't dare ask.
No, I understand actually when people do that, as you're describing. I understand that actually they're asking for a reason for them.
Right.
So I try to get to the bottom of actually what they're trying to achieve by the question, because they're being very polite, of course. But I know now from my experience of talking to people affected by cancer that they have an issue that they can't quite clearly explain.
The articulation.
Exactly, the articulation. So I know there's something behind it, what has prompted that question.
How do you get to the bit behind it? If you, I don't know, if you have time, or if you need to, how do you get to that bit?
Yeah, it depends on the setting, of course, because if you're in a social setting, it's quite difficult. But actually, people contact me afterwards once they know what my if they've never met me before, they know what my experience is. So generally, they'll private message me or something, and I'll get to it quite quickly, because I've been dealing with this subject for well, it's my 9th year now, and it's become second nature pretty much now to what I do.
So, I mean, they're two pretty heavy things, aren't they? Mental health and cancer. And here we are trying to articulate both together. I wondered if we could think a bit, or talk a bit about some of the definitions.
Mm-hmm. What is mental health?
Yeah, or exactly.
Mental unhealth.
Thank you. And what are the other words, right? Mental well-being, mental illness,
anxiety.
Okay, so the specific ones. What else would you say?
Anxiety and depression seem to be linked.
Yeah.
To me, they are very much linked, although sometimes they can be treated as separate issues.
Yeah. But do you think we put them all? So we've got one I was thinking about is this idea of overall mental health, and I suppose when I looked up the definitions, I've got the World Health Organization definition here.
Okay.
Do you want to hear?
Well, you can't beat that.
Well, someone might say that you can.
Yeah, okay.
I know. So if I read them out, I wonder what you think about this. So, WHO defines mental health and mental well-being as a state of well-being in which every individual realises his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community.
To be honest, I'd say that was pretty fair.
It's quite amazing, isn't it?
I'd say that was pretty fair.
It seems to me like it encompasses your whole life.
Yes, exactly. It enables you to do the best that you can do.
Yeah.
Basically, because obviously we're all doing different things. But yeah, I'd say personally that was a good definition.
It kind of made me a bit emotional when I saw it, because I think I've seen it before, but it's just the idea that actually that definition encompasses your body, your mind, your lifestyle, who you are in your society, how you feel. And maybe we always think about mental health as being this tiny thing that's a bit crazy in our minds, whereas actually it impacts everything. It impacts the way we behave, the way we interact with other people, how other people see us.
Yeah, I agree, and thankfully nowadays we're actually being treated with the buzzword holistically. Yes, okay, so we're mind and body now, which it's taken us how many thousands of years to work out that our mind is connected to our body.
Well, I reckon,
it seems to be such a big thing, but...
Thank goodness some people knew that for years. Just seems to we didn't quite know it.
But I can't quite understand, I try to be a logical guy, and I can't quite understand how it's taken us so long to work out that we need to look at our minds as much as our body.
Right.
And why that is such a big thing, because, quite frankly, to me, it's logical.
That actually, I mean, I think we'll talk about it later, but that sends me right into the idea of asking for help when you have a mental health issue, because we can't see it. So it takes so long to recognise it, whereas if you had a broken arm, I don't know, when you have cancer, you have a lot of treatment because it's present, people know it's there, but knowing that you have a mental health issue is much harder, isn't it?
yeah, it's hard to recognise. It's hard for others to recognise. But more importantly, I think it's hard for us ourselves to recognise, because there are so many factors happening in our lives. You know, obviously with cancer, we're talking physical treatment and stuff like that. But there are other things around. You know, we spoke briefly about work. That you've got the whole economic situation. You know, the world is up and down, doing different things financially. One minute you've got a pension, the next minute you don't. Yeah. So there's all of those factors added into your life mix, which we can be fed up with, right? Yeah, we can be fed up with politicians. We can be fed up with how our football team's doing. Is that depression, anxiety? No, that's part of everyday life, basically. Yeah. But I think the more and more you add into somebody's life, you know, you get a problem like cancer occurring. Yeah. And all the spin-offs that we get from that might be the final tipping point of someone's life. Yes. That really does push them into the depression and anxiety mode. But the issue is recognising that, because, you know, a lot of people have a lot of bad things happen to them in life, and for them, their natural way is just, oh, well, this has happened, we just deal with it, right? Because pretty much that's what we do. Yeah. You know, oh, I can't go to the doctors because this has happened. You know, he's going to throw me out on my ear.
Oh, I've been too many times for my...
yeah, exactly. Oh, I'm feeling all the time tired. And so it's a problem for us to understand ourselves whether we have that sort of thing. Yeah. And I think also, I don't feel that we have the required support in this country, actually. So I feel there's a hesitancy generally to diagnose mental illness, because actually once it's diagnosed, to varying degrees, of course, but I don't feel there's the adequate actually support around once the issue is diagnosed.
So that's a really interesting point. I'm just going to check. Hello everyone. I hope you can hear us. Good.
Yeah, sorry, I've got my little tablet there, which is cut off with its thing.
We'll look at the comments on here. So when it's been diagnosed, I like that sentence, and it kind of brings us into the idea of, there's so many paths we could go with this, isn't there? The idea of diagnosing a mental health issue. So, like, in our other definitions, we've got definitions of, depression, we've got definitions, the official definitions of things like anxiety, and then within that, things like PTSD, which I know is common amongst cancer patients.
Very, very common.
But if we can't recognise within ourselves when something isn't quite right, how are we meant to take that one next step, and then the next step, and then potentially 10 other steps in order to get the right support?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and my thinking around that is that actually, you know, we're experts in our own body, right, and our own mind. We are experts in that, but actually, when cancer or something serious like that enters our lives, we're not experts in that. You know, to be honest, I thought I was a life expert until I got cancer.
But also, actually, just let me ask, do you think we are experts in our own body, even before cancer? Do you think?
Well, I think we know when we're not feeling right. Okay. Let's put it like... No, sorry, I don't mean...
No.
We're experts, we know what's going on technically. No, I don't mean that. What I mean is that we will know when something's not quite right, okay, when it's out of the normal. But for all of us, I assume, certainly for me, I mean, I was a worldly wise guy, right? And I didn't think I was going to really experience anything new. But when I got cancer, I felt I like to. I'm not a control freak really, but I like to be sort of involved. Yeah. And it was honestly like I was a 20-year-old, and I felt that I had to go back to primary school. You know, because I felt lost. Yeah. Absolutely lost with all this stuff that was happening to me. I didn't know why they were doing it. I mean, of course they explained it, but your mind's not capable of taking that lot in, and you have to rely on your health professionals to be doing and knowing the right things because you've never experienced those things. What is normal for this? You've got no idea what is normal for that. So, in my opinion, what should happen there is that, look, these guys are doing it day in and day out.
Yeah.
They're dealing with patients day in and day out. We know everybody's different, of course, but they should be looking for the signs, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They'll probably see the signs of it quicker than we might.
Might do, unless we, I guess, I mean, the difficulty is we end up having to kind of be the advocates for our own health, don't we? And
Absolutely.
when you're feeling so overwhelmed,
Yeah.
I don't know, I mean, like, I know that there have been times when my anxiety has been through the roof, and trying to articulate that when you also come across as, I don't know what normal is, but you know, when you're out there every day and when you do stuff, when you're in your work and all that kind of stuff, even before cancer, I'm pretty sure I had anxiety.
I'm pretty sure much of us did, but it's what gives us adrenaline in a lot of instances.
Yeah.
So, there's good anxiety,
Yes.
and it's not all negative, right?
There's like clinical anxiety, and then there's maybe subclinical, which is when it becomes some symptoms are there that you aren't so great for you, but you maybe don't have enough of them for doctors to say you absolutely have a diagnosable disorder. And then maybe you have other times when you're just a bit worried in your life, and they can go into a more difficult situation. But there's so many levels of it that, I suppose I remember times, especially during and just after my cancer experience, almost wanting, and it's not fair to say people didn't listen to me, because I had very good friends and family around, and with the background that I have training in that kind of thing as well, but it doesn't mean that you can understand yourself very well. And so I remember thinking, I want someone to hear me, I want someone to hear what I'm saying, and I think probably those words were, I'm not feeling alright, I'm not okay, but almost trying to articulate that. Probably it manifested as, I don't know, probably anger, as fear, as retreating, whereas actually in my mind it was just like, something's not right. And this was after the cancer, when you go, I know that my body's not been alright, but now you're going, my mind isn't okay, it's not coping, it gets overwhelmed with too many requests or too many things, or too many, I don't know, even something like the washing up would become this huge big task that you cannot do because it's just another massive task, and it seems like some sort of life or death situation, but it's the washing up. So I'm really interested in that part, and I see you nodding, and I wonder if other people find this too. I know that when I speak to clients and people in this world, it's not dissimilar. The thing that becomes the hardest thing is what should be the easiest thing, like your diary or going for a walk, but it all becomes this big slog when you have this fog of mental ill health, mental non-well-being,
And I think for me personally, the fog, when I hit the fog, I think that was the time I recognised that something wasn't right. I mean, I was going on tube to appointments, and I was getting on the wrong tube, going even to the wrong station.
Because you just weren't...
I couldn't concentrate. There were
Yeah.
people around me, and everything was hurry.
Yeah.
And I realised, I left the house without my glasses, and just basic stuff like that, one after the other was happening. There was a whole stream of these things happening, and it was like, what happened to the person before?
Yeah.
This guy was sharp as a tack. He'd jump on a plane and do $1 million deal and then fly back. This is the guy who forgets his reading glasses, right? So what's happening to me?
Yeah.
And life felt like a fog. Absolutely, Emily. It did, and that's when I realised that I had a problem. Would you like to deal with some questions? Because I know we've got some
Shall we?
questions.
Yeah.
Should we sort of break it up and see how we're getting on
If
with the
you've got any
live stuff?
questions on the screen, do put them there and we'll refer to them. We've got one particular one from lovely Margaret, who has asked us a little bit about...
Can I just check my screen?
Yeah,
while you're
please
doing
go
that?
ahead. So one of the ones that Margaret asked us beforehand was, should psychological support be offered to all patients from the moment of diagnosis, or only when there's a crisis? So maybe what would be nice is if we talked about this and then went back a little bit to this idea of why mental health issues are so much more common amongst the cancer population. And I don't mean number-wise, because obviously the population is wider, but the rate of mental health. So Margaret's question, should psychological support be offered to all patients from the moment of diagnosis, or only when there's a crisis?
That's a really good question,
Yeah.
actually. I have my view's slightly different to that. Actually, my view is the fact that because cancer affects us all differently, we all need different things at different times. And personally speaking, I don't know what your experience was, but I was so frightened at the time. My prognosis was so poor, and so basically it was taking one stage at a time, because I couldn't think about, I couldn't, much as I did think about work actually, but I couldn't think about that because I didn't even know I was even going to get out of hospital, even if the chemo was going to do any good. So I tried to put that in some sort of logical way, and I thought, well, let's deal with stage 1 first, and then we'll worry what happens when we get to stage 2. So personally speaking, there was a lot going on, right, a lot, and I think, for me anyway, if emotional, psychological support would have been offered at that stage, for me it wouldn't have been appropriate because there was so much else going on. But that's only my story. But in fairness, actually, Margaret, I do see others that might actually benefit from that. And I've yet to speak to any person actually that's had psychological support on diagnosis of cancer.
So
I've yet to speak to one person.
Well, you might be speaking to that person here, because not exactly, but I knew that when I was diagnosed I wasn't all right, and obviously the whole shock and the obvious shock and stuff, but actually I knew that it was sort of sending me off into this crazy path, physically, as in all the treatment and the surgeries and stuff, but also mentally. And I remember asking for someone, and I was treated in West London, and there was one clinical psychologist for, I think, something like 1,000 patients who were going through the
That's
doors.
not much different today, actually.
So that's crazy, isn't it? And I don't remember when I started seeing her. I did start seeing her. I think it was more towards the end of my chemo. I was definitely going through chemo at the time. But you're right. I think when it's all happening at the start, and obviously everybody's case is different, and the treatment progress and stuff, you're just so overwhelmed. I remember her saying, "This is going to be like a job, so treat it like it's your job."
That's what I thought, actually. It's very the same thing. Yeah.
And like you've got enough with your job and trying to cope outside of it to keep going to more appointments. I know that places like, I don't know if anyone from Macmillan is watching or anything, but places like Macmillan have got their enhanced recovery program, or the sort of support package that each patient is meant to get. So on diagnosis, have they got this, have they got that? I would say that all of that stuff is amazing if it gets put in place, but
I'd say it looks great on the paper, is my opinion of that one.
There's delay in it, like being, which clinicians do it. There's obviously money issues. There is also the fact that we as patients may not recognise, so we might be offered help and say, no, I don't need it, I'm fine. And often that's perfectly fine, that's everyone's choice, but equally you may turn around 6 months later, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 10 years later and go, I didn't really work through all that stuff and now I need support. So there's a combination almost of the patient, of the person, versus the right people offering the right support at the right time. So wouldn't that be amazing if that...
Yeah, if that happened. I mean, to be fair, my experiences at my hospital, that's all I can specifically speak about there. I mean, I know what other people went through, but I was lucky I had the same team. There goes a plane. I had the same team, and still do, actually. So I had the same chemo nurse, I have the same consultant, and I see the same person every time I go. So that for me is wonderful, and I know that doesn't happen for everyone. I know and that I think was the key to me solving some of the issues I've had along the way. Is that people know how they know me so well, and they know whether something is right or wrong. But if you're like a bouncing ball forever going between different people, picking up your notes, putting them down, someone else reading them next time, that's when it becomes very difficult.
So we moved, we moved after my treatment, and so from West London out to Surrey, so I had all my notes go out there, but then I didn't have an oncology team. I had a specialist bowel hospital, which was in North London. I had 4 other clinics elsewhere. So between them all, I was the only person that was not holding it together, but holding all of my information. And it felt like this, I think that's probably added to the idea of anxiety, because what if I miss something? What if I don't tell all these people that all this stuff is happening? Somebody's going to miss something. And when you've been through something like cancer, you it's not that you expect it to be there, but you're kind of like, well, something must be wrong if I'm not feeling okay. I was just thinking about Margaret's question, should
it be offered?
Be offered to all patients? Now, I mean, my feeling is yes, of course, yes. It's up to them whether they take it or not, but also should it be offered and almost described in the right way? Because frankly, you know, we might say, do you want to go and talk to someone about this? And it's not, we don't get a choice about who that person is, so we may not like them. You know, it's all very well having a psychologist or whatever. I would obviously say a coach or something, but what if we don't like them and you don't want to talk to that person? You know, and also the location has to be right. You don't want to spend hours in traffic trying to get to them. The cost has to be okay if you're funding it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think, Margaret, yes, for us it's a yes, isn't it? That support should be available. But I think in the real world, you know, when we're struggling for the price of drugs and things like that, I think those are now more required, without a shadow of a doubt. But I think they're still classed as a peripheral service, unfortunately. And I think the reality of it is that it won't happen. And won't happen if it does happen at any stage. I don't think it will be on diagnosis and in the early stages.
I'd be really interested to know what everyone else thinks, because I bet that there are going to be such a range, right? There'll be people who, I don't know, especially say you've got Maggie centres in London. You know that you can walk into them and get some amazing services. You may not, I don't know what their access is like, but you might go from that range to, I've never been offered anything by anyone at any point unless I cry on my GP's shoulder, you know, and that's difficult. That's such a range.
I think actually that probably is the important point actually that you make, Emily. There are services out there, and let's not kid ourselves. And you're right, Maggie's is a great example.
Yeah.
There are services available. There's lots of local cancer centres that offer that sort of stuff, and actually in many cases they offer it for free.
Yeah.
But again, we come back to the old chestnut of communication and you know, egos and red tape. Basically,
egos. What the patient? You think? Or the
no, not patient egos.
No, but it might be.
No, not patient egos. Brand egos in the third sector. Yeah. Okay, not telling other people where the services lie, and only really having some sort of internal interest and not external. Yeah. And it seems that. You know, there are services. I'm not saying that we could cater for everybody. I'm not saying that, but things could be a whole lot better if people actually collaborate. You know, that's the word I use a lot to find these services. Mm-hmm. You know, most local areas have them. Yeah. But why is it the hospital doesn't tell, right? Why is it the GP doesn't know? Yeah. You know, what could actually benefit the patient?
And there's something I've come across lately as well, which is lots of empowered patients who are turning their own experiences into something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a number of them have, I don't know, started charities or groups or whatever. Yeah. And they are trying to let the local hospital know, or the local, maybe some of the cases are trying to work with local charities and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I get it. There is policy and there is, you know, bureaucratic stuff, but in many cases, I think things could be a lot easier for that person to support others. And I totally get it. You don't just want random people knocking on up and going, "Hello, I'm going to support everyone." You need to, they need to
be checked out. And absolutely, they're the right people doing the right jobs and all of that. No, I agree. You know, red tape's there for a reason. But it's now become an excuse.
Yeah. And if you've got a load of empowered people trying to support, and that they can support well, then I really wish we could take advantage of that. Chris, we've got some comments coming in.
Yes,
through
please
here.
do.
Have you got any? Oh yeah, you can read them on here. Do you want to?
Yes, hold on.
Here we go.
Let's put my glasses on now. Right, what's happened here? Oh yes, actually we have got some.
Who have we got?
We've got Liz Peel Yates.
Oh, hello.
She quite like that, she says. Margaret Chandler is watching with you.
Thanks, Margaret, for your question. Amazing.
Say something so that Coaching Emily knows you're here.
Oh, that's like a live.
George Norton. Hello, George.
Hello, George.
Cancer prompted me to realise I'd always been a big overthinker.
Yeah.
It also knocked my self-confidence, increasing my self-doubts.
Yeah.
The cancer itself doesn't make me anxious. It's the 1,000,001 minor occurrences of everyday life. Actually, that's so true, George.
And actually, that's brilliant, because what we all go, I don't know, it's pretty universal. When you're ill, I'm never going to worry about anything else ever again. This is so huge. I'm never going to be nervous about all those things I thought. And then as a different normal life resumes, you're kind of, no, I am very nervous. And
Back to the
about
bad ways.
all of the things I was really worried about.
Yeah. When does normal worrying that helps keep us safe become a mental health issue?
Brilliant question.
Remember that one, actually.
Do you want to talk about now?
Is it when you're worried that your worrying isn't worrying enough to do something about it?
That's amazing.
Well
do
done,
you want to
George.
go through? Do you want to look at that actually? Because
Yep.
there is, I guess, so there's a kind of scale from what we know and understand about mental illness and diagnosable mental health issue, and at the one end of the scale you've got a mental health issue that is quite clearly diagnosable through having a number of symptoms for a period of time. Your GP, a clinical psychologist or similar, would ask you lots of questions about what's been happening, how you're coping, using kind of different tools to see what your anxiety and depression and or other areas might be like for you. And then they would be the one to say, it sounds like you have X, Y, Z or whatever mental illness it might be. That would be sort of classed as a diagnosable disorder where it's clear you have enough symptoms to be not obvious, but for a doctor to know that that's what you've got. They would then sort of send you and advise you on the different routes that you can go to, whether it's self-help, whether it's a professional, whether it's a combination of antidepressants and all sorts of lifestyle changes. So that's one end of the scale where it's sort of a clean-cut diagnosis by somebody professional. You've got a sort of next stage down, which is maybe where we feel different, we're not coping very well, either we are crying a lot, we're overthinking, obsessing about certain thoughts, and that can be what my friend thought to me yesterday when I said something that seemed a bit wrong versus, is my cancer back because I've got a lump in my leg, or all those crazy sort of things. But also, I haven't done the washing up and that's a massive thing, and it becomes this huge trauma just like the cancer did, which is where your brain can't distinguish between something that's hugely problematic versus something that isn't. Anyway, you might go to your GP, or you might say to your friend, I'm not alright, I'm crying all the time, or I'm really angry, and it's not obvious that you might have a mental health issue, it's just that you have symptoms of a mental health issue. I guess you might go to your doctor and they may say the same thing, you're not diagnosable, but enough of these symptoms are present for you to be having problems every day. That is classed as subclinical. Oh, I hope you can hear. We can't see it because it's too cloudy, but you might be able to hear that. That would be classed as subclinical. So
Yes.
You're not quite diagnosable, but you have enough to cause problems in your life, your everyday well-being. And then there's sort of another level down where there's like, I'm worried about stuff, and maybe I have thoughts, but they're not there all the time, and it's definitely not an issue that would be, warrant that much action, but I'm overthinking. And so I guess I sound like I'm lecturing, but it's like this crazy sort of continuum of when something becomes a disorder that would be diagnosed versus when it's just a normal worry that we might have. And what is normal anyway? What do you think, Chris?
What is normal anyway? That's a good question, actually. There's the new normal after cancer, of course. Well, in my own instance, I suppose, I've always considered myself to be my background has helped me to solve all my own problems, if you like, and I've always been that sort of independent guy. And I'm probably the last one to go to a doctor or to ask for help. Actually, I've got friends that are plumbers and I don't even like ringing them up asking them to come around and fix my plumbing. So, because I'm just that person that doesn't actually really like to ask for help, and I don't know whether I'm uncommon there or not, but I've always been that sort of way. And talking earlier about the issues of memory I had, so I still have to go to the hospital frequently for checkups, and we always look for what was different to last month, if you like.
Yeah.
And after about 6 months, this continued, this memory problem continued. And I said, look, I don't know if it's me, look, I'm getting older, right, let's be fair. And I've had 8, 9, 10 years of medication and messing with my head. So, but I'm starting to forget things, right? And he's really, okay. And he recognised that symptom, and he said, actually, we're going to send you to neurology. I said, neurology? Right? And he said, yeah, we're going to do a few tests. And I thought, oh, okay. So...
Let me ask you, if you don't mind
Yeah.
me, I mean, what does that say, send to your brain? Because for me, that would be like, what, so you're saying I've got brain tumour? Or, do you know what I mean? It's like, it goes into this...
Yeah, well, they have to do, obviously, they have to do their tests, you know, because there's a logical reason to why something's happening. But it's just a question of it could be a few things. I think they were worried about A, it was a brain tumour, and B, it was dementia.
Okay.
Early set dementia. That's what they thought it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, actually, I did these memory tests, which was a total disaster. I couldn't remember anything.
Oh.
You know, the guy gave me this, remember this address 5 seconds later, and I was no good. I couldn't copy diagrams. I couldn't. I mean, most of the test was like I was doing my O-levels when I was at school. Anyway, the guy wrote and he said, actually, yes, there is a major problem with your memory. So they gave me a scan because they thought that's where it was.
Yeah.
And no, there was nothing abnormal there. They found a brain. But anyway,
They found two.
yeah. What it turned out to be actually was severe depression. And what the guy explained to me was, and he said, actually, believe it or not, it's all linked. Your memory is linked to your mood, which I never, I never knew that. And because my mood was so low, simply because all the things I couldn't do for cancer, my mind had just started to look at all the negatives. I couldn't taste my food, I couldn't smell my food. Everything that was normal for me is totally abnormal now, and there was no sign of anything improving.
Yeah.
So I suppose my mind had just tricked me into looking always on the negative sides, and it had been going on for some long time. So, I thought it was a memory issue. Me tells me I had severe depression. So, I think you've just got to know that something's not quite right, and you've got to ask for help these days. You've got to. I think you know what's right for you.
You know what's right for you, right? So there's a really good point. It's this doesn't feel right for what I'm normally able to cope with.
Exactly.
Something along that.
Exactly.
There's so many things I want to ask you. I guess. How long ago was that?
It was about 2 years ago.
Okay. And what did you sort of think when they told you that this is depression? What happened then? What did you do? I guess, if anything.
I laughed. Because I said, well, me, the smiley face, you don't get depressed. Yeah. He said, unfortunately, the tests show that you are severely. So I said, okay, what do we have to do now then? So he gave me some different options. That they wanted to play around with my brain with chemicals. And I wasn't a lover of that, if I'm honest, but I started on it.
So antidepressants?
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 other options that they could do, but I took that one first.
Yeah.
And actually it worked over a period of time. It took about 6 months.
Yeah.
And it started to work.
And now the memory's different?
No, I'm still on the meds. We've increased the meds a little bit. Because my memory started to slip back about 6 months ago, so we increased the meds, and my memory's back again. So I think it's going to be one of these. But the pleasing thing is, if you like, that they found it. Yeah. We know what it is, and we can do something about it. So.
But Chris, this is amazing, right? Because so much of our lives is around. I don't know. Is it about most of us want to get on and be good and happy, right? That's generally most people's life desire. And then so being able to recognise that you are maybe not so happy, but it's not that you're not happy all the time, it's different. There's other stuff happening in your body. I guess other symptoms of depression are like sluggish and...
Yeah, look, there's no one more sociable than me, right? I made my living out of it. But I didn't want to go out from the house.
Yeah.
Because when I got in conversations, I couldn't concentrate. Like we're talking now, it's easy to concentrate, but if there was a crowd, I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't remember that person's name. Still have to struggle with that, to be honest. But you know, in a crowd, when there's so much distraction, going on a tube, going on the transport, you know, queuing up at airports, it's become a bit more of a problem for me now to do that because I can't concentrate.
Yeah. I mean, part of that is, I know we're going to switch conversations, but I'd be really interested to know, to talk with you about. I want to come back to the idea of antidepressants, but also this. You know, this whole statistic about mental health issues being more prevalent for the cancer population. There is this statistic that it affects 30% of the cancer population versus 25% of the general population. And that's quite a big difference. It's not a higher number, but the proportion. Why? Can we talk a bit about why we think that is? What is it about cancer and the experience that, I say causes, but I suppose that there might be cause and effect, but is correlated with more diagnosis of mental health issues or poorer mental health in general? What is it?
I think we underestimate the impact that cancer has on us psychologically, if I'm totally honest. My own experience, you know, mine's gone on longer probably than a lot of, you know, this is my 9th year at it now. And in the early days it was non-stop, you know, it was chemo, this, that, the other, boom, boom, backwards, forwards, hospital. There wasn't a day when I wasn't involved in something to do with my health, and that went on for quite a long time.
That is wearing.
I was quite seriously ill, you know, I'd get over it, and then 6 months later I'd be seriously ill again. And so I think I never realised, because I was like, okay, here we go again, you know, let's go and deal with this again.
Yeah.
And I never realised what an impact that was having on my brain. Yeah. I never realised it. You know, when I started to have these conversations about why this was happening to me, the guy brought out this file like this, and he goes, "This is your medical file, right?" And he goes, "I'm not surprised, Chris. I'm not surprised." He said, "Have you ever taken a day off and just to sit down and think what's happened to you? You know, you were running around the world doing whatever you were doing. You're a father, all of that stuff. Right now, I'm still a father, but
and a grandfather,
and a grandfather now, yeah. But you know, your work stopped. Your whole way of life that you knew has stopped.
Yeah.
You've now become dependent on other people. You know, your finances are all up the spout." Yeah. All of those things, one day after another, those things were happening to you. But unless you take a step back and start looking at it, because he said you just went head on and dealt with it all. And he said, I'm not shocked, actually, that this is happening to you. And if I'm honest, I'm shocked it's come this far.
Ugh.
Before it could have happened much before this.
It's hard though, isn't it? Because it makes you feel like, why didn't I know? Why didn't I know? Surely if I'm talking about this all the time, or, you know, whatever, why didn't I know? But
I think if I'm honest again, and I don't know if this applies to people listening, but I was a bit aware of what may happen to me psychologically, but because I've always been a chirpy guy, you know, listen, we all have bad things happen in life, and I've had plenty of bad things happen even before cancer, right? We've all had that, family issues, this thing, that thing. And you know, you bounce back, don't you? Because that's what you do.
Yeah.
And
well, do we? And
well,
also we hope to.
Obviously, we don't. but in our mind, we think, oh, you know, we're just going to get on with it. I'm not a moaning type, really. You know, I wouldn't go down a doctor if I suppose the fact that I have regular hospital appointments gives me that opportunity. Because, in fairness, I wouldn't have gone to my GP with that memory problem. I wouldn't have gone there. It was only the fact that they know my history and they know the experience. Obviously, there's an experience of cancer patients having that problem because they recognised it straight away and knew what to do with it.
I mean, I suppose it's that sort of thing where everyone's we're all being checked up quite a lot, right? Until you get to 10, 20 years, I don't know, however far. So you're actually in the hospital, you're still in a system where you probably have more checks than someone
Yeah,
else
I mean,
who
I go,
doesn't.
luckily now, finally, after 9 years, I've moved off monthly to
Right.
2 monthly.
That's still a lot. That's a hell of a lot.
Exactly. So every 2 months, I have to go and discuss anything that's changed since last time.
Yeah.
You know, have I put weight on? Have I lost weight? So it brings it all back. You know, it's constantly not. You're not able to sort of clear
Yeah.
because it's constantly there.
I guess, you know, my experience is slightly different to yours. I suppose that's why it's useful that we're talking as well. So I had a very distinct period of time where I was having cancer treatment, you know, and had bowel cancer, so it was cut away, and chemotherapy is preventative and stuff. So it felt to me, it wasn't until about a year or two later that I was like, oh, it was actually just a year, you know, of diagnosis, all the treatments, all the surgeries. But the reason it was a shock for me to remember that it was just a year was because the experience carried on and carried on. And I say, you know, I'm lucky that it's gone. It hasn't come back, and you know, I say yet, but it's not there. So I know that, but the experience and the impact of the cancer treatment and the surgery has continued and continued and continued, and you know, severely, I suppose, in the first 2, 3, 4 years when I was adjusting to having a new way of going to the toilet because I don't have a bowel. The impact of all those surgeries on what it meant for us to be able to have a family, and you know, that's one whole massive topic in itself. But that, for me, was the biggest. I wasn't in treatment anymore, and actually I wasn't really seeing oncologists anymore. I was seeing other specialists again and again and again, and it was almost like I remember a friend saying to me, you know what though, this is yes, your cancer's over, but as a result of that you're kind of carried on with all of these other health experiences. And I suppose one could look at it like, maybe at one point I felt really unlucky, so I was like, how can all these things be happening to this one person? But actually it made sense. They all happened to me because it had all been as a result of the cancer. So I don't know how anyone else finds that, but maybe some of you are still in treatment, maybe you are years out of it, but it's this impact that it has. And for me, definitely the anxiety was high because it was this constant alertness, awareness of what I wasn't understanding, what was going wrong, why couldn't I answer it, why couldn't I get the things I wanted, you know? And you know, I want to also be really careful about being honest about that as well. The work I do, you know, I want it to be that I'm honest with people that has had a huge impact on me, but I do go on and support other people with their anxiety, with their you know, dreams and passions about life, but we can't do that in a vacuum.
No.
By being honest
No,
about
you're right.
it, you know, I hope it kind of helps people see that even though, I don't know, on screen or when you're talking to them, you're fine, you're normal, but everybody has those things. If 25% of the population have a mental health issue anyway, then that's 1 in 4 of us in any room who've got something happening. And I don't mean to make that sound trivial, but that's high, and it means that we probably do understand when someone says, I'm not okay, I'm having anxious thoughts, I feel very low, I can't get out of bed, I have memory issues, you know. Maybe we don't always understand those particular symptoms, but we get it when it's sort of packaged into this idea of a mental health issue.
Exactly.
So I really want to ask, what else about cancer is it that brings up all this stuff? So the sort of ongoing trauma is something I was thinking about, I guess.
Which specifically?
Well, yeah. How many traumas can there be? Like tiredness, I guess. Tiredness and fatigue that stops you from thinking straight, that stops you from making clear decisions, that stops you from having good relationships with other people, again, because you can't process stuff as easily. And then all of that really impacts this idea that you're more susceptible to a mental health issue because you've had these difficult things happen.
Fear of recurrence.
Oh my goodness, fear of recurrence.
Right. A lot of people live with that every day.
Yeah. And maybe that's an interesting one as well, because that can happen like 3, 4, 5 years down the line, even when you've been given, I don't know, this holy grail of all clear, whatever that is. But just, yeah, I'm fine, but I'm also going back into the hospital, you know, in a month's time, and it's always there, that scan, that procedure, what if. I think maybe as we get further away, there is a thing about time. Maybe as we get further away, we manage to cope with it differently. And perhaps for some of us, it really does become this past memory that doesn't come back. But for many of us, it does haunt us. Even
my experience of no, that's okay. My experience of dealing with doing a lot of work I do, I don't think, if I'm honest, it goes a little bit behind. Of course, that's what memory does a little bit. You push some of that further away. But I don't know too many that have got it out of their system. That fear of recurrence. I think once you hear the word cancer and you've been affected by it, I think recurrence is another one that's common. Yeah. A common feeling for us. I was just going to check, Emily, because I'm conscious we had a couple of questions.
Oh my goodness, we also only got 10
and
minutes left.
I want to do a couple of mentions because we've got some more bits here. George again, very good point, no, I don't need it, I'm fine.
Yeah.
It's important not to just offer psychological support, which perhaps needs a more friendly name, actually, yeah, it's true.
Oh, good idea. Good
Once, point. And then leave it, but come back and offer more later on. Kaz.
Offer once and come, yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, Kaz, lovely to see you, Kaz.
Hello.
I agree with Margaret, and I believe that the emotional and psychological effects of a cancer diagnosis are often overlooked. It seems that the physical can be treated, but the other is ignored. Yeah. Not deliberately, but it is not seen as important by many in the medical profession. Many patients struggle with these issues and get no support even when they ask for it.
100% true. And, actually, especially things, the word depression comes up for me as it is serious. Depression is serious because if we don't get treatment for depression that is impacting every part of our life, then it can lead to lots of other things. And I mean that in the sense of when you have undiagnosed depression and you have depression, you're unlikely to go to your health appointments. You probably will miss things like your scans.
And you won't take your drugs.
You may not take your drugs. And of course, let's go right to the end, there is a risk of suicide. I mean, the rate of suicide within men is high, and I think we cannot have a discussion about mental health if we don't mention it. I'm not going to start going to all the stats, but it is serious. And if, I can't stress enough that if we start to recognise those symptoms, it's possible to talk to someone.
I agree.
I suppose the irony of depression is that it does that horrible thing to us, which it stops us from wanting to do anything. It tells us that even if we took action, nothing would change anyway. And how crappy is that thought? Because small, tiny changes can make a small difference, but over time they can start to help us. And at some point, I really want to talk as well about the idea of getting support, because there's such a range of it. There is this idea that, I'll come back to that.
Okay.
Shut up, Emily.
And I know we've got a couple. I know we've got a couple of questions, so I'm shutting you up just to move it on a bit, Emily. I found that's your weakness. You need to be very timely.
What?
Right. Charlotte Spendlow.
Hello, Charlotte.
Hi, Charlotte. How do people, this is a great one, how do people deal with scanxiety? Yeah? Especially when you are having regular checkups. Can you live past the next date and make plans into the future? Wow.
Great question.
That is a great question.
What do you think?
Again, my experience has shown me that is a big issue, actually. For many people, particularly those having regular scans. I know a lot in the breast cancer community, a lot of ladies there, and a lot of men actually, that are having regular scans, and I know that's a major problem for them. Yeah. Charlotte, that's a really good question. I do know people that deal with it, and I suppose that's the only word that I can use, deal with it, because it's a fact of life, isn't it? And but I know that is a problem for so many, and I suppose it's up to the individual to somehow do it. Personally, I don't find it a problem now. Personally, because I've had the worst given to me. I've had the worst. My worst news that you're not going to survive. I've had all that. I've done all my preparations for all my wills are in order and all my debts are left to somebody. and all that, all that sort of stuff. So I've done all that. So I suppose for me, I don't have that fear anymore because I've already dealt with it in the early days. But not everyone's like that, and it is a big. Would you have any suggestions for that, Emily? Because you obviously must have faced the same sort of thing with quite frequent scans.
Yeah, not dissimilar, and also work with some people now, and we talk a lot about the idea of going back into hospital. So individual, because it will depend on how you're feeling and your own history and stuff. But there's some really, they're not all that easy, but some easy to access behavioural things. So stuff like having some really amazing podcast or meditation type technique, something that gives your auditory system a bit of a knock, so it keeps you well or calm or comfortable, something you're listening to. And that's really important because you want your senses to almost be a little bit tricked into thinking about what you're doing. So something you love listening to, music, partner's voice, or something that's recorded, a video that you love, listening to that and potentially watching it too. Try and get as many of your senses into another state as you possibly can. There is, of course, the behaviour of meditation, which is obviously quite calming. But if you don't like meditation, you've never tried it, it may not be the right thing for you yet. If you like it, then maybe it's the thing you do just before your scan. There's also kind of working out what it is that is going on for you. What are the words that you're saying to yourself that are constantly coming up about your scan? Is it that you're scared of the actual procedure going into the room, or is it that what if the results are like this? Because what you do to help yourself will be determined by what you're focusing on as well. Obviously there's things like talking to someone about it, but really if you're going for sort of self-help techniques, the things that you can do that are the most calming for you beforehand, letting people know that these scans stress you out, so that they're not adding pressure to you when you're about to go for one. It's lovely when people ask us how we are, but we don't want to answer 20 texts. No, I haven't had the results yet. Have you had the results yet? No, I haven't had the results. There's just that kind of communication, managing communication as well, which is hard as the patient because you're just going through it. But that's such small things to do. But actually reminds me that there's a blog post that I wrote this last night in order to go with today's presentation, and some of the things on there will hopefully jog people into thinking, what are the techniques that I can use? So after scanxiety, the idea that what would it be like if I'm okay? What would it be like if I'm not okay? Almost allowing your brain to go into parts of those questions that perhaps other people tell us not to think about. People say, don't think about it, you'll be fine. And frankly, we don't always know that we'll be fine. So you're allowed to feel the anxiety. I suppose my biggest takeaway from today is that you're allowed to feel not okay. You're allowed to feel that you're not coping. And actually it is reasonably normal to feel that you're not okay, that you have brain fog, that you over worry and you obsess about things. It is normal and it's okay. It's even more okay when you can try to get the right support for you. So yeah, I've gone off on the question a bit, but in a way that was a nice question to add into what do we do.
Yeah, anxiety is such a common issue, and I can quite understand why it is. But I think, to summarise that, Emily, I think you just got to find what works for you. Yeah. We used to go out for dinner after we did the scan, just so that there was something positive to focus on after that, because obviously once you go through the scanner, you're starting to feel in your brain what's happening, what's the result of this going to be. So we'd try and do something good, maybe go to the cinema or whatever, just to take your mind off it, really. So that's another good trick. Yeah. I was aware that there was a question. Yeah. I think
we've got a couple of questions here submitted, and then we've got about 5 minutes.
That one's probably good.
It's a good one, isn't it? Should support only come from a team of trained mental health as a volunteer?
I love that question.
Brilliant question.
I love that question. No is the answer to that. For me, about only trained mental health professionals. No is the answer to that. Simply because there's never going to be the numbers of the appropriate staff qualified that actually we need. Yeah. And if I'm totally honest with you, I think a very big percentage of people affected by cancer would benefit by speaking to volunteers, by speaking to peers that have done similar things. Of course, that's not everyone, by the way, because not everyone is able to articulate their cancer experience in a way that would make it feel more positive for others.
Right.
So that's not everybody can do it just because you've had cancer. It's not a qualification that you can teach others about it or talk to others. So, not everyone is capable of doing that work. So let's make that quite clear, by the way. So I think, Margaret, and I think you'll agree actually that there are plenty of people capable. When people have cancer and survive, we have that great feeling of wanting to give something back. That's a power. It's a very powerful feeling to want to help others. You want to give something back to the hospital that's just saved your life, or you want to, you go back to clinic and you see these poor people who are next on the rota coming through. Going through the emotions you've gone through. Right, so there's absolutely no reason why we can't use and harness that positivity and experience to give to others. And in fact, actually, I'm sure a lot more patients would actually feel more comfortable talking to other patients than actually clinicians, because you don't get bogged down in sort of real technical language. A lot of people feel a little bit afraid to talk to their doctor because, he's my doctor and I'm only the patient, right? There's that sort of feeling about, particularly older people, and it's quite easy to organise, Margaret, as we both know, and Emily, from your experience. It's quite easy to organise decent support, but I think, there are some charities that do it, if I'm honest. They do it. You see a few from Macmillan around and about. But there's a lot more that could be done.
My answer to that question is agree with you.